Welcome to the Daily Objective. We're going to be talking about the latest news out of Italy, who just elected who is being called the most right-wing leader or the most right-wing party since World War II. Well, that brings back memories, doesn't it? Anyway, we're going to get into this. Some of us are really up to date on Italian politics, and let's just say others of us need to freshen up. So we're all in this together. Let's figure this out. Here are my co-hosts. Representing the fascist side of the argument, it's Nikos Rucka. I'm joking, mostly. And we've got Mark Pellegrino, the actor and political opinion man.
What's up, man?
Not much. So I guess, Nikos, why don't you get us started? We know you're the most informed generally on things taking place outside the United States.
Yeah, so Italy is the Disneyland of European politics. Every crazy thing that you could imagine has happened since World War II and even before World War II in Italy. So what happened is that in the snap elections that were called for yesterday, Italy is well known for its political instability. The winning party is Fratelli d'Italia, Brothers of Italy. Why is it called this way? Because Fratelli d'Italia is the opening lyrics of the Italian national anthem. By the way, one of the coolest national anthems. If you haven't heard it, put it on YouTube, but put it when there's before an important football game, when the whole team is kind of singing it in passion. So this party won. This party is led by a woman. She's the first female prime minister in the history of Italy. She's called Giorgia Meloni. Now, the elections were characterized by low turnout. So it's not that she's this super charismatic person and everyone in Italy can't wait to vote for her. And she will lead together with two other parties, which you probably have heard before. The Lega Nord, the League of the North, which is led by Salvini, a guy who was also involved in a previous administration. So again, a Eurosceptic and right-wing populist Italian party being close to power is not something unprecedented. And also the party of Silvio Berlusconi, who has had he has been the prime minister various times from the 90s to the 2000s. He's 85, but hey, he's the Cavaliere. He can do whatever he wants. He's still around. So it's going to be a coalition government of three different parties. In some ways anti-systemic, particularly compared to mainstream politics. In some other ways, though, not very anti-systemic. So we're going to ask two questions today. The first question is this really a return to fascism? And should we be really worried with what is happening in Italy? And a second question, completely different from the first, should we, people who are interested in freedom, people who are interested in individual rights, should we be excited about this anti-systemic turn in Italy? And spoiler alert, my answer to the first question is no. This is not fascism 2.0. The answer to the second question, shall we be excited, is definitely no. So two no's.
So Eurosceptic means like reluctant to be part of the European Union?
Mostly being... So Eurosceptic is someone who is not very excited with the prospect of giving more power and sovereignty, so to speak, to the European Union. Now, just to clarify, the Brothers of Italy, Fratelli d'Italia, and Giorgia Meloni does not want to take Italy out of the European Union, does not want to take Italy out of the euro. So in rhetoric, she's more critical of the European Union than the average Italian, let's say, mainstream politician, but she does not want to take Italy outside of the EU. One of the reasons for this is that Italy is expecting 180 billion with a B euros from the European Union in the forthcoming period. And they have there are a lot of money they've taken for COVID release or for other reasons. So I don't expect to see her in a collision course with the European Union. Although many people in the European Union are not excited with a national populist or national conservative, as we would call her, being in power. So this is the big picture. Now we can discuss it from various different angles, but back to you guys for your first reactions or thoughts. Oh, sorry, one more thing, which is very important. Why are people really worried and people really saying, hey, this is a neo-fascism. So Giorgia Meloni used to be a youth party of Italian social movement. What was Italian social movement? It was a big umbrella party that had been around since 1945, and it included people who were loyal to Mussolini. So it was a neo-fascist, at least at the beginning, a neo-fascist party, but also it was a party which was quite big, and it included from people who were nostalgic of Mussolini to people who were closer to the mainstream of the Italian right, to the mainstream of the Italian conservatism. So Meloni was part of this party, and this is why many people will say that she has a neo-fascist past. Also in the past, she has given some comments about Mussolini, things like, well, he was a good leader, and things like that when she was young. So this is why you will hear many people talk about this. It's about this link with this party that doesn't exist anymore, which was the party that was, let's say, a party with ideological references to Mussolini. Taking into account how crazy Italian politics was post-World War II, this was not even the most dangerous part of the far right in Italy. The far right in Italy was involved in terrorist activities, in violence. So this was more like the mainstream part of the far right in Italy. So again, Italy, completely crazy politics. We could do a whole episode about the crazy post-World War II politics of Italy.
Mark, were you about to ask or comment?
Well, the only thing I know about her is anecdotally through some friends of mine over there. And what's her position on LGBTQ rights and immigration?
So the two main selling points of
I left out, but I it's okay. I woke up at 3 o'clock this morning to work.
Say you left out one of the alphabet letters?
I did leave one of them. Not deliberately. I know I'm going to get trashed for. I think I left out the T. Excuse me.
So the two main selling points of Fratelli d'Italia were immigration, predictably, but also culture wars. So Giorgia Meloni, you could see her being in CPAC some months ago. She's been close with Victor Orban, the leader of Hungary. She has been in contact with Steve Bannon, the guy who was the ideological, let's say, guru of Trump. So in a way, she's a culture warrior. Her selling point is that she's a culture warrior. So she talks a lot about issues that the American countercultural right talks about. Abortion, she's against abortion. Euthanasia, she's against euthanasia, which tells you also something about how she sees individual rights. And when it comes to LGBT rights, she claims that she respects these people's rights, but she's against things like them forming a family, marriage, and parenting. So she's in favor of traditional family. She's in favor of the traditional, let's say, nuclear family. Also, she speaks all the time about identity, and she speaks a lot against globalism. So we can discuss a bit more these things, because I find it very interesting that the selling points and the slogans of the boring anti-consumerist, anti-globalization left of the 1990s is now recycled by the countercultural right. They talk about globalism and how it would just want to make us consumers, and by this we're losing our identity. It's like listening to, I don't know, like a Tyler Durden from the 90s, like a Fight Club watching leftist. Now suddenly these have become the slogans of the far right, added with their usual stuff about the family and the nation and tradition and all that stuff. So she capitalizes on the culture wars, she capitalizes on her anti-immigration stance, and she claims that she's for the rights of gays and the LGBT community, but not when it comes to things like marriage. And also she speaks a lot against gender theory.
So she's like Steve Bannon or Victor Orban, basically. What do you think of Victor Orban, Nico? So I can know where to place you, because if you're dismissive of claims that this is anything to be super scared of, I'm curious, how do you feel about Orban over in Hungary?
So I'm not an expert on Orban. Let's do a whole thing on Orban, because I don't want to talk about something that I haven't prepped. So I'm less afraid, let's put it this way, of Orban than many people are. Particularly since I saw his stance, many people thought he would be the fifth phalanx of Putin in Europe. Turns out he wasn't that. Now, when it comes to his legislation within Hungary, he's following a bit the agenda that the national conservatives want to follow and that the Trumpites want to follow, which is the state to intervene in things like education so that it puts away the influence of the left. So they would claim we don't want to ban ideas, we just want to make sure that these ideas are not taught to schools. But in terms of particular legislation and what has been his takes on LGBT rights and stuff, I need to check things out more, because I don't know them out by heart.
Now they're intervening in education, you say, but like they're intervening in public education and trying to have influence of other ideas in this public education. But basically, virtually nobody is saying just shut down the public schools and privatize and give people their tax dollars back and let them send their kids to their own.
No, absolutely not. And actually, Meloni has some nationalist policies when it comes also to economics, when it comes to the energy sector, when it comes to public infrastructure. So she will claim we are not in favor of nationalizations per se, but in some particular areas, maybe this needs to be controlled by the state, or maybe the state needs to control the infrastructure and, for example, with communication, and maybe the particular networks can be private. So she has some good policies when it comes to taxes. She talks about the need for lower taxation and all that stuff, but she's not a laissez-faire economist. So it's not like in Brazil, where you have Bolsonaro, who's a right-wing populist, but he had some good people around him in terms of economic agenda. It looks like her economic agenda will be more towards the typical conservative stuff, which is far from what I would like to see. Also with Orban and with her, particularly Orban, though, they want also to appear as being intellectually kind of active in the culture wars. So Orban invited Jordan Peterson. They were on the same he was kind of his guest. That was some months before the pandemic. So they do see themselves as fighting the fight against the left, as fighting the fight against the woke. And this is what makes them also quite popular among the American culture warriors. And I can understand the appeal of that. People like when they see someone standing up to this hegemony, let's say, of the left. The problem is that they're doing this by repeating some of the main premises and some of the main beliefs of the left, but that might be another topic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Victor Orban, I've heard said shut down media outlets altogether, just shut down media outlets critical of his party or critical of the government. And he spoke at CPAC. He was like the keynote speaker. Like he opened CPAC and Trump closed CPAC. Yeah, Mark?
Yeah, I feel like some disaffected intellectuals are gravitating towards him. You know, they've gone over there to speak because they happen to be at the forefront of the culture wars. Ellen Barkin just tweeted something that she felt like, you know, after this election of this person in Italy, it reflected that we were back in 1933. And, you know, Michael Malice got on her, and I said something to the effect of, she's not wrong. I mean, I do feel like we are just in a war between, you know, two forms of rabid leftism, commies and the reactionary nationalists who still embrace socialism, but they just put a flavor on it, like a nationalistic flavor on it, and they paper it over with the culture wars as a palliative. So it goes down real nice. So it goes down a lot nicer than Mussolini and Hitler did. But hey, they're not really that different. And if they get a lot of power, I suspect they wouldn't be any less violent.
Oh yeah, she's not wrong. I mean, this culture war has blinded people, and they've made people so tribal that they can't even see what's happening. The fact that you have libertarians and anarchists cheering on the overturning of Roe v. Wade, like they're happy that abortion rights are going to be impeded upon because it owns the left. Like it shows the left like how impotent they are. This is why the world needs philosophy. It needs objectivism.
I don't agree with the comparisons with the 30s, mostly for one thing. In the 30s, you had subjects like human beings who were ready to bring forward this violence. Think about the Friar Corps in Germany. Like, these were people who were World War I veterans. You had feet on the ground who could be the stormtroops of, for example, of Mussolini's Great March to Rome, although that's more like...
They learned a Fabian form of socialism works better. They learned that attacking it from that the warfare of concepts and ideas, and even against concepts and ideas, is far better and far more insidious and embraces a larger population than outright fighting in the streets. Yeah, we're not getting beer hall pushes, but we're getting people talking in nationalistic terms and cloaking them in the culture wars, because people do see how anti-conceptual and nihilistic the other side is. So it's now a war waged in the conceptual realm, but it's gonna get violent. I mean, it already has in many respects in America, but both sides are primed for that end. And that's why I think it's not dissimilar to 1933. I feel like in many respects, Peikoff's ominous parallels is coming true before our eyes.
Yeah, we're never going to have a perfect parallel to the 1930s because the world is not the same place. We don't have like out and out communists the way we did back then. We've got a new type of left and we have a new type of right. Today's populists, people like Alex Jones, many of them, virtually all of them probably have a copy of Atlas Shrugged. They see themselves in some twisted way as, John Galt fighting back against, the status. But ironically enough, because they're so sloppy and incoherent, they're ushering in statism faster than anyone. So it's we're not going to have a perfect parallel of the 1930s, but there's definitely the parallels are definitely ominous.
If I'm thinking about Peikoff, I'm mostly thinking of his last book, The Dim Hypothesis. So in very simple terms, Peikoff claims that first comes something which is disintegration, which is basically the chaos that we've been experiencing, and then comes something which is called misintegration, which means someone who promises you to fix this chaos. And I totally understand the urge that people, the will that people have to go beyond this disintegration. Let me give you one example. Today I was in the center of Athens. There used to be a closed market, which used to have, in the center of Athens, which used to have some of the most elegant shops in Athens. So it was one of my favorite places. So I walked there today and I was in shock. Not a single shop was open. And all you could see was drug addicts, homeless people. So people feel that something has been lost, that there needs to be some return to something, some return to some order. And again, I totally understand that. The problem is that the solution is not the authoritarian right. And the problem that these societies are facing is not so, no, put differently. Some of the things they see as the problem, for example, the hegemony of the left, all that stuff, is true. Some of other things they say, as for example, the European Union's immigration policy, there are questions to be asked there. So, for example, we saw some weeks ago in Sweden, a brother party of Fratelli d'Italia also winning the elections, and their main point was immigration. So when for 3 decades we were not allowed to discuss any of these issues, and and anyone would be considered like a racist or a xenophobe for even bringing this up, that wait a minute, we need to figure out how this is going to happen. What is our What is our take, for example, in terms of integration, in terms of, but all these things were out of the agenda. So now they bite us in the back, and this is a fertile ground for the far right, or I don't want to call it far right necessarily, this anti-establishment right, let's say.
Yeah, it seems like everybody points to the problems around us and says this is the consequence of individualism. Like the conservatives, they look at these strung out drug addicts in the street, and they look at the reckless youth that are demanding their pronouns be respected at gunpoint. That's individualism unhinged. And I guess what's the flip side of that? The leftists say like, oh, look, capitalism that's individualism. Like what they perceive, like I guess they would say like fascism, the state and corporations working in cahoots. That's, capitalism, which is, individuals being unhinged and no regulation, stuff like that. In various ways, people point at what they don't like in society and they say this is individualism left unhinged. But that's not what we mean by individualism. We're Enlightenment individualists. We believe there is objectivity. There is an objective way to reason and an objective ethics. And we want a government that protects the right of the individual to behave that way. I'm laughing because I can already predict they're going to take that clip and turn it into a short here on YouTube.
But that just,
yeah.
Sides are too. They're both enemies of individualism. They just come at it from a slightly different perspective. So that makes them both. To me, since the left is the collectivist, what we associate with the origins of collectivism, I would say, and they're both collectivists. Just one side is traditional collectivist, the other side is a socialist collectivist. Neither side gives us a solution to the problem. But the right is coming up with the right kinds of words and analyzing real issues that are out there in our society that need to be taken care of, but offering all the wrong solutions. And I think the solutions eventually end in violence. I can't see a Trump, future without a great deal of violence. I can't see necessarily this administration moving forward in Italy without some form of violence. That's why I think it's like 1933, commies versus fascists, fighting each other in the street for political ascendancy.
Again, though, let's keep some perspective. In the 70s in Italy, there was literally violence. There were bombings, and people who didn't know, is this far-right terrorist, far-left terrorist? So particularly Italy is a country that has experienced political violence. It's a country that has experienced the assassination of the leader of a ruling party in the late 70s by the Red Brigades. Again, this is the assassination of Aldo Moro. So we could do a whole discussion. I can do a solo at some point on Italy in the 60s and the 70s, because in some way, almost everything that happens today in Italy is a continuation of this very weird polarization in Italy between the communist left and the conservative right. So we're talking about a country where the Communist Party, there were elections where it was the second party. It was the party that used to control a lot of towns. They would win local elections. So it's a country that has experienced violence. That's why I'm not very convinced that we are in a danger of experiencing anything close to a new 1930s. But let's hope we're going to be around and we're going to see. Only time will show.
Well, even if there's no violence in the street, like what if, a fascist party peacefully is elected and takes control and starts to implement their policy? Like, is that not fascism then? Because it wasn't.
But I don't see such a party. I don't think Fratelli d'Italia is such a party. And I don't. So this is way, way far. I'm not saying it cannot happen, but we're still far from there. We're very, very far from there. And again, we've seen Eurosceptic. Sorry, not Eurosceptic. We've seen parties like Fratelli d'Italia around for at least 2 decades in various countries in Europe, in Netherlands, in Austria, recently in Scandinavia. Le Pen in France has been the second presidential candidate going to the second round 2 times, and if we add her father, 3 times in the 21st century. So nothing much happened. So yes, the culture is going really, really badly, but I don't think we're going to see anything resembling fascism anytime soon.
Or some would say we're all fascists now in the modern world, but not the scariest version of fascism. I will say this: what scares me most is the tribalism of it all. The fact that we have all these people pointing at the other tribe and saying those guys are so evil that whatever it takes to defeat them must be done. Doesn't matter who we align ourselves with. Doesn't matter what we advocate for, as long as we beat them. And of course, the left is the one tribe that this tribe wants to defeat, and vice versa. The leftists, they think that anyone who's not on the left is a fascist, Nazi, patriarch, et cetera, et cetera. So that scares me, because when people are primarily, first of all, motivated by something negative, the bane of their existence is the other tribe. That's a scary sign. And also they're incoherent. They're not thinking critically. It amazes me how the right-wing reactionaries are so good at thinking critically when they argue against the left on certain issues. They're good at stopping the left and saying, wait, no, you're not being logical here. But then they turn around to us when we try to make the case for capitalism, for individual rights, as opposed to nationalism. And suddenly they love to shut their mind off and go, oh, you're against nationalism? What are you, a globalist? What do you want? Like global government. They're just so lazy and dishonest when the case for capitalism and real individualism is made to them. It's very disheartening at times.
You mentioned national conservatives, and we've discussed it, and we've discussed it also in a podcast in The New Ideal with Elan Journo. I think national conservatism is the ideology which is closer to this new type of right in Europe. So I wouldn't call them far right. I wouldn't call them fascist. I would call them national conservatives. And if you go and check the manifesto of national conservatives, you see there a lot of the things you see in this anti-establishment, or however you want to call it, new right. And you'll see there the collectivism. You'll see capitalism could be a good system, but if it's left to its own device, it can lead to the usual boring and middle of the way stuff, which can very easily lead to authoritarianism and more unfreedom. So the idea is you can be free up to the point where your freedom interferes with the interest of the community.
Yeah. By the way, I thought Mark might be leaving us for a minute, but now Mark is back.
If Mark leaves, it's not because he's pissed off with us. He's on call for
or both. Could be both. He could. He could. Did you say something? I was talking.
I just said the set. That's all. So.
He's on the set.
Yes.
It's virtually everyone agrees today that the job of the government is to basically engineer society. So nobody is saying the government's here to protect your rights as an individual, or that's rarely said. It's mostly, the government is here to take care of us. So capitalism or free market policies are basically a favor in a sense, or they're seen as a good policy, like it's the best of all policies, but they don't see it as something that is derived from human nature, as like something that the government is here to protect. It's more like the government can allow us to trade freely until it's not in the interests of the community. So let's say you want to open a strip club, or a porno theater. No, well, that's not great for family values, and family values are a pillar of the community. And so the nationalist right would say, no, shut down the porno theater, because the job of the government is to promote family values. So you can apply that same pattern of thought to various other industries and instances, such as, quote, big tech. As soon as it's their opinion is, big tech is not promoting free speech, and it's not promoting, discourse, etc., and it's promoting the left, and it's promoting all types of anti-family values, etc., then time for big tech to be broken up, they would say. And
only today, Michael Gove, who is again supposedly the most free market and most liberal person in English conservatism, he said that something should be done for PayPal, because as we are going to a cashless society, PayPal cannot discriminate against conservatives or whatever, which again shows you how he does not understand property rights. If we're going to a cashless society, don't go and buy from places that are going cashless. Go and buy your coffee somewhere which is not Starbucks. And if you don't like PayPal, don't have PayPal. I don't have PayPal, and I'm for cash. And even if I have to deal only with one baker and I have to drive 5 kilometers, I'd rather do that rather than have the government say, no property rights anymore. I can tell to a private entity what they can do. So I don't like the cashless society, but at the same time, I don't like the government intervening in property rights. And that's why one of the reasons why I will be against the new right, I will be against the authoritarian anti-free right.
We got some chat room action here. Robert has been a member for 6 months, and he says, I'd be okay with Italy being a laboratory to show us what far-right nationalism will lead to, but I'm very worried about a possible lab leak. I think there's some metaphor usage there. Joni.
We already saw it in the 1930s.
Yeah, I mean, clearly people don't learn that lesson even when it's right there in front of them. I hate to say it, but it's just going to piss off some people. But if actual Mussolini were around today, people would, just as they did back then, they would say, well, at least he's not a communist.
Which in a way he was. So Mussolini was a split from the Socialist Party. And actually, when he split from the Socialist Party, many hardcore, like Lenin, found his split that it kind of... it made sense. So Italian fascism is very, very interesting to examine, and it's very interesting that. Anyway, we're opening a can of worms here.
Well, it is interesting. So, Mark, yeah,
he just came up with another innovative way to attempt to implement Marxism. Right? I feel like Lenin saw that the way Marx wrote it wasn't quite working. He had to make some adjustments here. I think Mussolini seemed to see the same thing and thought he can come up with a better mousetrap but to still trap the mouse. It's still all about that, just a better one, he thought. And it all ends the same. But don't you think these are just iterations of Marxism? They're just trying to find that thing that sticks. And now they think they've found democratic socialism. They think this is the way to usher in these ideas into the world, but it's all the same. Right.
I've been on record saying that fascism is like communism on crack. It's pretty good.
Fascism is communism with an ounce of self-esteem, because at least you're saying the nation means something, as opposed to people, are all cogs in one. There's sort of there's a different focus. It doesn't just obliterate individualism entirely. So it's sort of just like or maybe the best way to say it is communism with a splash of narcissism. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that's it. I mean, the fascist. You read look at how family is looked at by both. So you read Not We the Living, and the one communist is saying, the family is just a bourgeoisie advent there to help the bourgeoisie have power. So like they're rejecting family in favor of the workers of the world, and then the fascists, they're saying, family is good, the German family or the Aryan family, whatever, like they're quote pro-family. Today's nationalists, I just was watching this morning, Rubin interviewing Orban, not Victor Orban, but another Orban from Hungary who agrees with Victor, who works with Victor. He was saying, we use, family is the foundation of society. So, the government should encourage family values. Basically, like the government should treat us all like a family. So the left and the right, they look at family differently, but all of them agree that the individual is not it.
Yeah. What do you say? Because you seem skeptical or thoughtful.
Me?
Yes.
No, I haven't got a comment on that. I was trying to gather my thoughts on Mussolini and Lenin, but that's for another topic. Let's move on with the super chats.
All right. Joni Spinoza has been a member for 2 months, and he says, time to turn volume up to Sepigi. Sepigi? Do you know what he's saying? I don't know. Mark sent us 50 SEKs. Is that the Swedish krone? We love the Swedish. We like the way they look. We like their currency. We like when they watch.
And sorry, we didn't do an episode for your own interesting elections that you had recently, and your own. Again, the party which is in power in Sweden is a party which is a brother party with Brothers of Italy.
Oh, great.
Or a sister party, I should say.
Way to go, Sweden. God damn. Excuse my language. All right. But anyway, Mark says, is this party in any meaningful sense conservative, or just panders to conservatives, or is mainly nationalists? I mean, what does the conservative even mean at a certain point? Usually conservatives today are just echoing what progressives, quote unquote, progressives were saying, you know, in a previous generation. They basically, I've always said, they go through the trash can of the left and they just take stuff that the left has gotten bored of. So the left used to be all about, you know, the progressives invented nationalism. They invented protectionism. And today that's like a conservative value, right? Protectionism and creating jobs, quote unquote, here at home, and national interest and all that BS. So it's like, what does conservative really mean? What do you mean, Mark, in the chat room, when you ask, is this really a meaningfully conservative party? Like, what would it mean for them to be meaningfully conservative?
Nowadays, I would say conservatism is just a form of populist nationalism with some mercantilistic economics thrown in. And so you're right. It's basically progressivism 100 years ago or 80 years ago.
Yeah. By the way, Respighi is an Italian composer, our great producer says.
Oh, well, the Italians, say what you will, but their music and their opera is decent. Roland with 199 euros says, here's to help defeat the likes of Orban. Like he was going to say the left, but the likes of Orban. Thanks. Every penny counts. Ellie has been a member for 5 months and says, if this is history repeating itself and we know it, then can we look back at history and figure out how to stop it? Yes, but it requires a lot of people questioning what they currently believe or adopting new beliefs that they don't currently hold. And that is what philosophy is all about. So,
but hey, there's one thing I would want to take from the populists and back in the day from the communists, their political energy and their understanding of propaganda, their understanding of how to connect to the masses. So their ideas sucked, but there's a lot to be learned from how they did politics, minus the violence. So
is there?
Yeah, there
well,
is.
There, I think there is. But you know, what socialism has that I don't think capitalism has behind it is a sort of mythology. It has a narrative that is romantic in a sense. And so I think we individualists, even though we have Atlas Shrugged, we have the Fountainhead, we need to find an even a better narrative, a better mythology that people can connect to and get behind romantically, because that's essentially what attracts people. It's emotional. It's very basic. And we need to touch those chords.
And this is not to say we don't appeal to reason, we appeal to something else. This is that, no, we use our arsenal, we use our tools in the best way. And this is what we're not doing good enough.
I mean, I think when you get too focused on politics, you run the risk of losing sight of the real battle and becoming tribal.
But I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about how you connect and how you pass your message.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, yeah, Mark,
yeah.
After all, the narrative of history, it's a narrative of the way people interact, and it's a romantic narrative in a sense, in the way that it describes the battle that's going on. People like the idea of the battle. You know, they like the idea of conflict and overcoming, and there's a heroism in this narrative tale that we could tell, I think, better.
I think I'm such a politics is downstream from culture kind of guy that, like, to me, like, politics is basically going to sort of take care of itself. If people in the culture are focused on being selfish, like if people are inspired by art, etc., and they want a good life for themselves individually, then political movements can't really distract them from that, and various charlatans can't really manipulate them, and people they're not susceptible to any political movement that's not there to sort of enable their pursuit of happiness. So I tend to see politics as just like really almost like just kind of almost doesn't need to be fought. But I even as I say that, I understand that in the meantime, there are battles that need to be waged, such as, let's say you want school of choice, you want school of choice, homeschooling rights, whatever, privatized education. These are very much things, abortion rights. These are things to fight for immediately. But in terms of the major political change, I think it's only really going to have a good political change, like a one towards capitalism. The inspiration for that is not going to be sort of seen as easily. It's not going to be as it's not going to be televised, that revolution. I hope that makes some sense.
No, I think you're right, but I think progressivism it came about as sort of in a pincer movement, to be honest with you, because the culture at large, at the rise of the progressive movement, was largely individualistic and capitalistic. It was a small minority of energized people, which I think Nikos was hitting at. I mean, when you think of the communist revolution, the Bolsheviks were a very small minority of energized people that were able to move an entire country in a certain direction. It was likewise
1,000 members. They had 1,000 rural members in a country that was expanding in 2 continents. And
yeah, but
they got power.
But that was in Russia.
Thing with America, you had a few German transplants that became entrenched in the educational world. They educated our political pundits and our politicians and the people who influenced the culture. And you had a few muckraking journalists who became authors and wrote fictions that really influenced people. A very few energetic people, politically minded, did push our culture in this direction. For the last 125 years have been influenced by those small groups of people. We could do the same thing. I think we could do the same thing if we have the same energy. But they were promoted by politicians. I mean, promoted by Roosevelt, promoted by Wilson, promoted by the progressive, senators and the congressmen that passed progressive laws against us all. And eventually it became part of the zeitgeist.
Yeah. So I guess a sort of a possible opposite argument to that would be that the socialists, they were cashing in on people's sort of underlying altruistic premises. So yes, they were largely individualistic, and then these socialists came along and sort of tugged at their heartstrings with appeals to altruism, and they were able to have that effect. That, along with philosophical legwork being done for a century or two prior, the influence of German philosophy and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess I don't know if we disagree per se. Maybe we all agree that energy is good, inspiration is good. The only thing I would say personally, I see the political battle as like almost not even relevant. Like it'll take care of itself when the philosophical and artistic and sort of battle for selfishness sort of takes place.
That's where we disagree. I do think politics is downstream from culture. And I do think it plays a huge part in the way politics goes, but I think you also have to wage the war on the political level.
All right. Well, then let's do it, guys. Going back in the chat, we got
what's going on there, Nikos?
Oh, what's going on, Nikos? You got something?
No. I'm having some examples in mind, but I'll be opening can of worms. So let's continue. I was thinking of Iran. But I thought, okay, if I give Iran as an example to how our movement can be successful, then I'll have a lot of explaining to do. So continue with the
whether it's Iran or Russia, these are not America. These are not England. These are not Enlightenment countries. These are basically a blank canvas for somebody to paint on compared to a place like America. That's kind of how I see it. The Bolsheviks could not have violently taken over America. They needed to take an ass backward farm country like Russia. Ashley Shrugged with 199 says, referring to the Italian prime minister, her LGBTQ and abortion stances are frightening. I'm going to guess the new party is elected as anti-abortion or largely going to curtail abortion rights and probably pull back some of the gay rights, such as gay marriage, stuff like that.
Particularly marriage and anything that has to do with raising children. So, but again, let's see how this will be translated. And again, she's not going to govern alone. Although the two parties she will govern with, the one is Lega North of Matteo Salvini, the other one is Berlusconi's party.
It's really interesting to watch Dave Rubin, who is, married to a man, and they've not adopted, but they've surrogated, I think, two boys separately. Maybe I'm assuming each one of them is the biological father of one baby. So they basically had two babies a few months apart with two different women. And as this is happening, Rubin is also, I hate to say, sort of like selling himself to this nationalist conservative movement. So he's like interviewing this guy from Hungary, not Victor Orban, but the other Orban from Hungary. And Rubin's asking, yeah, so what if someone's not Christian? Let's say they're an atheist or they're gay. Like, what will be their fate in this new order of things? And I'm like, Rubin, like, do you even have to ask? You really think these people are going to let you and your husband adopt or father two boys? Anyway. Tragic. Allie with $2 American says, what prompted for the majority vote? Good job on show. What prompted the majority vote?
What prompted the majority vote? So does this mean why they voted for her? So first of all, she hasn't got majority votes, got 20-something percent. And again, these were the elections with very, very significant low turnaround. So again, it's not that there was an enthusiastic rush, and she's not very charismatic as a politician. Of course, it's not easy to win the elections with a relatively new party. The party is like 10 years old, but she's a bit like Le Pen, which means she's riding a wave. But I think these people have a very clear ceiling. Both Le Pen and Meloni, I don't see them as very charismatic and as able to lead like a huge social movement or something.
Christopher Smith sent over $2.99 Canadian and says, cool. Thank you for that. Those are all the super chats. Thank you all for joining us today. Looks like we lost Mark, at least temporarily. So yeah, the same guy who says we need to charismatically fight the political battle won't even fight the podcast battle without leaving. Apparently, producing TV shows is more important than saving the world. Coming up today at 9 p.m. UK time, it's Ask Me Anything with Harry Binswanger on HBTV. Bring those super chats and ask him the tough questions. Believe me. Trust me on this.
He'll answer them.
Oh, he will hold no punches. Anyway, yeah, looking forward to that. Thanks, Nikos. Thank you, Mark, wherever you are. And thank you all for watching. We'll be back here tomorrow for the Daily Objective. And goodbye.